Hi, and welcome to All Things Cozy with Matt.
And Gillian.
We are a bi weekly podcast about everything that is warm, soft, and comforting. Today's episode takes us on a journey to faraway lands where we'll discuss the coziness and special magic of fairy tales. Before we spin straw into gold, let's check in with what's cozy in the news. My first news fable goes like this. Once upon a time in Charm City, there was a wheel named Mr. Trash Wheel who loved to gobble garbage. Mr. Trash Wheel was powered by the sun and loved to bathe in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, where he pulled plastic bags, bottles, and other debris out of the water before it could enter the Atlantic Ocean. This year, Mr. Trash Wheel celebrates his 10th year of munching muck and lives happily ever after with his family, Professor Trash Wheel, Captain Trash Wheel, and Gwenda the Good Wheel of the West. Together, these semi-autonomous trash interceptors have removed 5.2 million pounds of trash out of the ocean, which has been incinerated to generate electricity for over 45,000 homes.
First off, I have to tip my hat to you creating this as a fairy tale. That's very impressive.
I had to stay on brand for this episode's theme.
I know. I feel like I failed. F for me. Mr. Trash Wheel, when I saw it when you said it, it brought a smile to my face. I wonder if he's in a blended family.
I think he is.
What his situation is, his ancestry.
Yeah, all of these interceptor wheels are these machines basically that are these conveyor belts that pull trash out of the water and into big dumpsters. Imagine just a wheel spinning a conveyor belt. It sucks the trash out of the water and it dumps it right into a dumpster.
I have an affinity for Mr. Trash Wheel because he has the most everyday man name out of the whole bunch. Captain, Professor, he's just a mister.
Yeah, the other ones are really gilding the lily. And I think I just like the simplicity of Mr. Trash Wheel.
It gave up.
What an icon. I feel a little bit robbed because you and I lived in Baltimore for several years. We predated Mr. Trash Wheel by about a year.
I was going to say.
Mr. Trash Wheel arrived on our turf and has been there ever since. And it's crazy to think that it's been over 10 years since we lived in Baltimore.
Well, we got to go back, pay our respects to Mr. Trash Wheel.
Exactly, because we really never got to meet properly and meet his entire family that spawned in the Inner Harbor. The thing, too, is they have like these big googly eye signs on them. Very cute. And they have mugs with their faces on it, shirts, and it's a really cute little city mascot as well.
Well, Baltimore is just the home of mascots in creative ways. That's where they excel.
Branding overdrive in Baltimore.
I also have a nature-based story. And though Earth Day 2024 might have passed, Matt, you can still keep the nature love train going in northern Michigan with Nature's Megaphone. The device is a 14-foot-long wooden megaphone, as Michigan Live reported, and sits in a serene spot in the Agnes S. Andre and Boyd B. Banwell Nature Preserve, and visitors who sit or lie in the megaphone can bathe in the magnified noise of nature and its beauty, cloaking you in a blanket of sound city dwellers, like you and I, often crave. The Little Traverse Conservancy staff who oversaw the construction was inspired by similar megaphones in Estonia. One of the staff members coordinated with the local high school to have students construct the megaphone using donated wood from Home Depot. Although it opened in May 2019, the megaphone is making the rounds of the news again, having a little bit of a renaissance, if you will, just in time for the lush natural concerts of spring and summer.
It's also really cozy if you look at it. It is this like cylinder of wood that you just get to sit inside. So even if you weren't looking out into this beautiful vista, it would be cozy to sit in that. But to know that it's really designed to pull in all of those sounds and it's such a natural looking little sculpture, it's a very cool concept.
Yeah, and I watched a news report and a woman who, the newscasters went inside, just like, you could do yoga in it, you could meditate, you can do all the things in there. You can make it your own, which is really special. You can maybe have a friend in there, experience the sounds of nature amplified together.
Oh, Gillian, you have some plans inside of the wheel.
You stop.
Now be careful because it's going to amplify your sounds.
This is too naughty for all things cozy. I was thinking of a nice proposal. Like people probably propose in there, I assume, and do their meditating solo.
It's really cool. I would love to visit this.
I would too. I also read the Google reviews, which were very warm and comforting, but one person gave it 1 star and said, I couldn't find the megaphone. No, there's a low rating. It's really, you couldn't
I
find
would
the
be disappointed too if I came all that way. I'm wandering around a forest and I can't find the megaphone. But you know what? A lot of really magical things happen when you're wandering around a forest.
Oh, I love that segue.
Gillian, tell us a little bit about fairy tales.
Let me set the scene. Twinkle lights sparkle against green, lush backyards. Lively and sweet scents fill the evening air, and old, recognizable places become otherworldly in the blink of a firefly. Summer may not be the coziest month for many, but where it wins is its undeniable magic. And so, with the season right around the corner, we thought it was the perfect moment to discuss fairy tales, where we suspend our disbelief to enter enchanting worlds of fairies, princesses, and well drawn villains who grow our imaginations so they can hold valuable lessons. Fairy tales also raised us, acting as bedtime stories and the backdrop of our dreams. They bonded us to our friends, where we spent hours watching Disney movies and acting out our favorite scenes. There is so much to love and feel cozy about when it comes to fairy tales, and our discussion today will cover our early memories of them, our favorites, and much more. So let's enter the forest, Matt.
Into the woods.
So let's kick it off with what we find cozy about fairy tales and our early memories of experiencing fairy tales. Matt, I'll pass the scepter to you.
Ooh, a scepter. First of all, fairy tales obviously were a big presence in my life just by all the stories, bedtime stories. This is not a fairy tale, they're more nursery rhymes, but I feel like nursery rhymes are the gateway drug into fairy tales, and I really loved my Mother Goose collection that I had just sitting around, and even before I could read it, just poring over the beautiful pictures and the pages. And I was really obsessed with the lyrics to, I guess it's a song, but I always thought it was just a poem because I never heard it sung, of Who Killed Cock Robin, otherwise known as the death and burial of Cock Robin. Are you familiar with that, Julian?
No, I have never heard of Cock Robin.
It's an English nursery rhyme, and there is like music to it. It's from basically the 18th century, and it goes something like, "Who killed Cock Robin? I," said the sparrow, "with my bow and arrow. I killed Cock Robin." My favorite verse part of it is, "Who caught his blood? I," said the fish, "with my little dish. I caught his blood." And there's always like a fish holding a little dish in the water, like with blood in it. And I bring that up because I feel like that kind of visual and energy of darkness, this latent darkness in fairy tales, is really alluring and exciting for children. Like we know from musicals like Into the Woods or other analysis of fairy tales, that sort of borderline between childhood and adulthood, things that kids really don't understand, the complexities of life or the danger of things, and they're taught those dangers and morals and other lessons through fairy tales. And they really stick with you from being a child into adulthood, and they exist in this magical place. They teach you what to be careful of and some life lessons, but they also really contribute to you being cautious, knowing that there are some very strange, scary things in the world, like little fish with blood in their dish. One other early memory of fairy tales, when that comes to mind, is a school play that my elementary school put on of Rumpelstiltskin. And I still think of that play because I'm sure if I could have a VHS tape of Rumpelstiltskin, I would be laughing and rolling on the floor. It'd be so ridiculous. But when I tell you as a little kid that Rumpelstiltskin scared the crap out of me, even when it was being played by, I don't know if this was like some troupe that came in, performed it for us. I think it was that. This is not a
Oh, I thought
children
you were
performing.
performing. Oh.
No, I think this was like a guest troupe that came in to perform Rumpelstiltskin for us. Scary, scary. I was so afraid. I was very far away and still don't have a firstborn, but I still live in fear that Rumpelstiltskin will come for it. I think just the danger and mystery of fairy tales. I think maybe it's the same reason that adults watch like true crime. Fairy tales are the true crime of childhood.
I love that.
They almost allow children to experience a little tidbit of fear and excitement, and the world is bigger than what they know right in front of them.
Well, I think you summed it up beautifully and really well, and I feel the same way. I loved as a kid the trickery, the bargaining, the last chances, these themes that aren't typically afforded to children in storytelling. And I think that kids are a lot more, we should give them a lot more credit for understanding things and having a taste for that and wanting it. I was really invested in that kind of stuff when I was younger. My mom always says that my littlest sister, she loved the baby dolls and all that kind of stuff. And then my middle sister loved animals and Wonder Woman Dalmatians. And I was into stories. I'd always be begging the backseat mom, tell me a story, tell me a story. And she would create all these fun little stories. And it was always going back to those concepts. And you see it a lot in Rumpelstiltskin, which we'll get into later. But just the high stakes. Because when you think about all those cartoons, there's really not a lot of high stakes. Things will be taken away from you, but it's exciting and thrilling. And then someone loses and someone wins. It's a lot of fun and it's interesting. Also, too, I have this wonderful memory of my dad reading us Grimm's fairy tales and Brothers Grimm. And every night he would come in and read us a story from that. And he'd get a big kick out of our horrified reactions because there's always something really horrific and grisly happening in the stories. And I think that we over accentuated our reactions because we saw how he was having fun with it, which is, it sounds bad, but I think it's funny. Like you get a kick out of it when you're reading these stories and seeing these kids' reactions in real time. I don't have a lot of memories of him reading to us. It's more my mom's thing, but that's something that he really enjoyed. And so it's like a bond that I share with him. I remember. I love that book. We wore the cover out of that. But I absolutely agree with you. It's funny also too, you mentioned the play of Rumpelstiltskin. There's a lot of plays about Rumpelstiltskin. Shelley Duvall, I think she was in a play about Rumpelstiltskin.
That story is just such a trip. This poor girl, her dad is lying about what she can do.
Well, he's a
She
bozo.
Yeah, she's thrown into a tower, threatened with death every single night if she doesn't do this thing. Then some creep comes out of nowhere and says, "I can do it for you, but I'm gonna keep asking you for stuff." This is really a nightmare for her, and we're glad it works out. And then who is Rumpelstiltskin? Like, why is his name Rumpelstiltskin?
It's the curiosity. I think that's another thing that kids who love fairy tales, I think they're innately curious. They just love to pore over things they can wonder about. You're still wondering about Rumpelstiltskin. I'm still wondering about Rumpelstiltskin. And be careful about calling him a creep. We'll get into that.
Gillian is a staunch defender of Rumpelstiltskin.
Little Rumple.
I think only you have a pet name for Rumpelstiltskin.
Segueing into our favorite childhood fairy tale. We touched on it a little bit. I know I feel very strongly about Rumple, but what is your favorite fairy tale from childhood outside of the nursery rhymes and all of that?
Any favorite fairy tale of mine, there's a requirement, and that requirement is a witch needs to be present. And the one that really sticks with me that I knew I loved then and I love it now, and a witch is heavily featured, is Hansel and Gretel. As somebody who likes to eat, I'm not like a foodie, but I do like being full.
We both like to put on the feed bag.
Right.
Feed fast.
I can really identify with a hunger driven story. Talk about terrifying for children. These kids are being put out of their home because no one can afford to feed them. They successfully return back, and then they realize they have to give them no access to stones so they could find their way back to the house. And then the little bits of bread don't really work, right? Because the birds eat the breadcrumbs. So what little food they had to get back to their family is gone. And then just the thing that it seems like the answer to all their problems ends up being the key to their near demise. But also, like you said, the puzzle solving of fairy tales, the way that the kids work together to defeat the threat and end up really saving the day, because when you can bring to your family a whole home made of food, you've really solved the hunger crisis in your little German village. So there is ultimately a happy ending, even though it's very scary along the way, but also just the ingenuity of the children and how they get around to trick the witch, having her feel the chicken bone so that she thinks that Hansel is still too thin to be put in the oven for a very long time. Things like that are those like little details that really spark imagination. And also there are some really great adaptations. I really liked the one that came out a few years ago called Gretel and Hansel. And it's a more updated retelling of it with an age difference between Gretel and Hansel, where like Gretel's much older and looking after her little brother. It's a really great expansion and adaptation of that fairy tale. That would be my favorite overall.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with a witch has to be central. The fear is so well constructed in these witches and villains and fairy tales. And no witch is the same, or villainess, if you will. They all have all different motivations. And in Hansel and Gretel, obviously the motivation is very simple for her at least. But in others, not so much. And I love that Hansel putting out the chicken bone. That brought back such a strong visual memory for me. And like it brings me back to that moment. And that's what's so special about fairy tales, too. That one little detail that just sticks with you and is really evocative and very not just like relatable. I'm not putting chicken bones in out to witches, but
It happens more than you think.
it's relatable in that you and I, it both sticks out as an image and a memory. But it also goes to what you're saying about the kind of touching the lesson a little bit, working together and collaborating, because I often wonder if some of these lessons are extremely outdated. At least I think my favorite fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses, because that one is if you're not familiar, from 1815. So the lesson is very dated. a king wants to know why his daughter's shoes are always worn out and why they're always tired in the morning. And it turns out that they're escaping to another world. And it's so vivid. And that's why I love this story so much and why it's so cozy to me, because I love visualizing this enchanted forest that they run off to, the golden leaves, the diamonds dripping from the trees. It's just so glittery and special. And I think I definitely have like escapist personality. So just imagining I could just walk off into a beautiful, bejeweled forest was really alluring. And they dance and they have fun and they eat and they, I guess, a little flirtation with all the guys in the enchanted forest. I don't know who's really all there, but I assume there's some flirting. He enlists the local men, the king, to investigate what's going on with the daughters. And a lot of the men fail because the princesses spike their wine, which I think is pretty cool and smart on their part. But one of the men who is trying to figure out this mystery, he doesn't drink the wine. And so he follows the daughters and he figures out everything and he tells the king. And the king, of course, says, pick one of my daughters to marry. And I guess his only saving grace of the guy who figured out the mystery, he's like, well, I'm a little bit older, so I'll pick the oldest one. He didn't go full on creep. I guess that's a plus. But I was trying to think, like, what's the lesson in this? I looked into it, and a lot of people are saying respect your elders. I don't know if and that's not why I like the story. I like it because I just love the idea of women escaping into this alternate reality, because clearly their reality sucked a lot. But the magic of the forest and just trying to visualize when I was little what that would look like, and having this alternate universe where no one could get you and you could just have fun and be free and all of those things. What do you think the lesson is in that?
In this tale and in a lot of these fairy tales, a gender element, or specifically often a lesson for girls to learn about how they need to behave, not as much for the boys, but for the girls, there's a lot of rules and what they
So
should or
many
shouldn't be
rules.
doing. This kind of feels like that a little bit.
Gotta stay in bed. Yeah, but I think that's also why I'm drawn to this. Like, the ladies have, at least for a few months, they got some independence and they're going
Yeah.
off to party and just being absolutely free and having fun. And I would just love to see a visualization of this somewhere and what that forest would look like.
Yeah, the title alone is so evocative. I think you're right. The freedom that these princesses get to experience. I mean, then they're given away to a soldier.
Only one of them, only the oldest, because the soldier is like, well, I'm pretty old, so I guess I'll have your oldest. Which, like I said, not to get too creep, but I guess that's the one score in his corner that he didn't say, yeah, give me your youngest.
But then they're cursed after for doing all the dancing, so it's dangerous for these princesses to be dancing all over the forest.
At least they wore out their shoes, they had a lot of fun.
Honestly, I'm not as familiar with that one as other fairy tales.
But it's a fun one, and like I said, just to, like you said earlier, spark the imagination. This one does a really great
Oh,
job
yeah.
of that. And it definitely still sticks out to me as an adult, but I have a favorite one as an adult.
Is this one that you, like, read a lot now, or is it, like, one that you look back on as an adult and have a new appreciation for?
That's a good question. When I was going through this exercise, I was looking back into the Brothers Grimm to jog my memory. 'Cause like I said, we really wore out this book and I reread every story in there. And one that jumped, not to pun intended, I guess, was The Frog Prince. And so I had forgotten about it, but when I reread it, or actually I listened to it, and there's this wonderful website, Lit to Go, and you can listen to the audio of it. And that was really fun and interesting to do, because my typical experience with this was through reading. And it follows this princess who is playing with her golden ball. And that's what triggered the memory of the golden ball. Because I distinctly, going back to imagination, the visualization, I always imagined this golden ball and she's playing with it near a lake and it goes into the pond or lake, whatever it was. And she can't get it out. And this little frog pops up.
Well, I know why you like this one.
Yes, of course. You already knew from the Frog Prince. The frog pops up and he says, I will go get your golden ball if you bring me home to your castle and you let me eat off a golden plate and sleep in your bed. And the quotes are so funny. This little princess, she is, I know this is a cozy podcast, but she's a little bleep. She's not very nice. Because when the frog pops up to before he even offers help, she says, what can you do for me, you nasty frog? She lies to him and says, "Oh, yeah, sure, you can come to my house. You can eat on my plate, whatever. Just give me my golden ball." And he goes and he gets her the golden ball, and she goes home, and then she hears a little knock, knock on the door. When she opens the door, sees a frog there, she's freaked out, and the king says, "What's going on? You seem a little shocked." And she says, "Oh, this frog is here. He."
I love this like drunk history style reenactment of the Frog Prince. I like really want this to be reenacted by like improvisers who are just acting out the words you're choosing for for these characters.
And so she's like, "Well, he got me my golden ball, and I promised him I would let him eat on my plate and sleep in my bed." And she said, It's a nasty frog at the door." And the king said, "You got to keep your word. Let the frog stay and eat on your plate and sleep in your bed and the whole nine." So a point in his corner. She brings him to her bedroom, and he's like, has all these commands: "Put me on the chair. Let me sit next to you. Put the plate nearer to me so may eat out of it. Let me go look at your bed. I'm tired. Carry me upstairs." Like he's has all these little demands. At one point, she's once again not a nice person. She's very bratty. She's like, I'm over this. I want you to leave." And he says, "If you don't do these things, I'm going to tell your dad." And so with that, she throws him against the wall, which is horrifying. And if I had
Domestic abuse.
I'm sure if I had heard that, I mean, I did hear this as a child. I can only imagine. I was probably absolutely horrified. I was probably on my knees crying, cursing this woman. But when she throws him against the wall, he becomes a wonderful, handsome prince. And shockingly, he wants to be with her. I guess he likes a feisty lady.
That's way
He's so
different from needing a kiss. The magic's a bit rougher in this story.
So he said that he would bring her back to his castle, that he was a prince all along, that someone put a spell on him, and the only way he could get out of the spell was if he ate on a golden plate, and which is once again in fairy tale super specific conditions, and sleep in a bed. So he brings her back to the castle, and everyone's so happy that he's back. His driver of his coach is so thrilled that they describe it as he hears this snapping sound. He's like, "Oh, is the carriage breaking down?" And the driver of the carriage is, "Oh, no, it's just the bands that had been tightening around my heart when you were a frog. They're
Wow.
snapping and releasing."
That's a line.
It's like, well, maybe he should have gone with him. I think he's with the wrong person. One last thing I want to say was she said the so mean to the frog. I think she called him like, "You better be quiet, you water splasher." That was some dig, splashing that water.
It's the worst thing you can say about a frog. Most
Yeah.
frogs are really good at not disturbing the water too much. This frog really, because it was a human, doesn't know how to swim very well. I think that was foreshadowing, actually.
I love about this one, find really cozy. Not only is this just hilarious, the whole entire premise, but just imagine this frog ordering on this princess, "Show me the bed. Is it comfy enough? Like, give me your plate," like showing up at the door, coming to collect. And that's another thing I like about fairy tales. Everyone always comes to collect. And that's an important lesson. They come knocking on your door. The frog is there. "Hey, you promised me a golden plate. Where is it? Let me." And she can't get rid of him. They never give up. Once you make a condition and you agree to it, that's part of the lesson. If you make a promise and you commit to something, you have to pay up.
No free lunches, not even in fairy tales.
I would love to see that into a play of some kind, but no frog smashing against the walls. And
Did you always read this fairy tale with jealous eyes that you wish it were you who got to show the frog some love?
yeah, it would be a dream come true. First of all, if a frog plucked out of the water and spoke to me, even to begin with,
How disappointed would you be when that frog turned out to be a man?
I would find the person who put a spell on him and let's do it all over again.
No, I preferred the frog. Thank you very much.
Is your favorite adult fairy tale or favorite adult fairy tale? Like
Oh,
is your favorite fairy tale as an adult as zany and wacky as mine?
not really. Although it is pretty dark. When I look back on fairy tales as an adult, one that sticks out to me is Cinderella. And that is because as an English teacher, I would teach comparative analysis using Cinderella. It's a very common practice because it's such an easy story to compare contrast. If you have anyone watch the Disney Cinderella and then you compare it to the Brothers Grimm version of Cinderella, and the details are wildly different. And that was when I really realized just how different the Brothers Grimm story is. And just, I'm sure many of you listening already know this, but for those who don't, in the original Brothers Grimm version, Cinderella is basically tortured by her stepmother in terms of she wants to go to the ball, but it's not just that it's Cinderella do chores, right? It's she's throwing these lentils in the ashes and Cinderella has to pick all the little individual lentils out of the ashes. The stepmother says, well, if you pick them all out, you can go to the ball with us. Cinderella calls on the birds who help her because another detail that you never really got from the Disney version is that Cinderella would go to her mother's grave every day, and then the birds and the spirit there would communicate. So that's where she was getting her bird helpers who would come and pick out all the lentils for her very quickly. And the stepmother comes back and said, "You weren't supposed to be able to do that." She throws even more lentils in, and then Cinderella does it even faster with the help of her bird friends. What I love about the conclusion to that is that the stepmother is like, "I don't care that you did this.
Yeah.
I'm still not taking you to the ball." So she locks her up and then runs off with her stepsisters. Yada yada yada, glass, crystal slipper, whatever. And the prince is coming back around. In the original version, instead of the shoes just not fitting, the stepsisters cut off. So one cuts off her toe to fit into the shoe, and the prince realizes on the ride back that there's blood coming out of her foot and turns the horse around. Now we get the second stepsister. She cuts off her heel. Same thing. The prince has his eye out for foot blood and notices that something's up with that. I guess that's a good thing about a glass slipper is you really can't hide that stuff.
That's true.
Comes back and finds the dirty Cinderella happily ever after. But then there's even more. There's a wedding, and as her bridesmaids, birds peck out the eyes of the stepsisters. They're very punished for being evil, which is kind of nice, actually. There's a really heavy-handed moral to this story about cruelty getting its comeuppance, going back to everyone has to pay up. These sisters and the stepmother did bad things, they have to pay for their actions. It's almost like a scared straight version of Cinderella. But yeah, so as an adult, like finding out those details and realizing that there were more darker elements is interesting. And when I was looking up Brothers Grimm, these folk tales are much older than their written record of them, and how much they changed the stories over time as they rewrote them over their lifetime as published texts. And so there's all sorts of different versions, like with details added, different words made to make it more relatable to people. So these are really malleable texts. And because they were sourced from folk stories, there's all these different iterations, even just from neighboring countries of these stories. So it's a really wide open field in terms of how these fairy tales might be heard or understood in either an oral tradition as folk tales or as a written record by the Brothers Grimm.
Wow, I don't even remember those details, and you surfacing them is really wild, and especially the pecking out of the eyes. But I think what is really moving with the fact that these birds just didn't come out of nowhere, because in Disney adaptations, they're just these bizarrely, just randomly friendly, as we expect all animals to be, and they're woodland creatures and they're cute. But in this version, it has a lot more weight and meaning,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. Those bloody feet, that prince swear off dating after
I
that.
hope that fish has its dish ready because there's a lot of blood.
Yeah. I think also too, the Brothers Grimm really highlights emotional pain. And I think that's kind of kids' first introduction, like through storytelling through that, which is interesting. And you're like, can't believe people could be that cruel, or you feel sad, and you're experiencing and exploring and thinking about your emotions almost for the first time outside of your own existence and self.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into some fairy tale rapid fire questions. And by rapid fire, I mean, we're going to take our time. Rapunzel's long hair didn't grow in a day, took some time. So we'll explain our answers, but it's just fun to get a little more insight into our experience with fairy tales and our favorites, and just expand outside of the Brothers Grimm, and also dive into my manifesto about Rumpelstiltskin.
Let's do it.
Fairy tale you'd like to see made into a movie.
3 Billy Goats Gruff.
That's a fun one. Why?
I just feel like you could really expand on all the different personalities of these 3 Billy Goats and the disappointment of the troll who never really gets that Billy Goat meal that he was looking for.
I love that troll. I think I have this affinity for trolls. I would do the 12 Dancing Princesses because I think Sofia Coppola would do an amazing job. I'm thinking like Marie Antoinette, those kind of vibes. I think she would do a wonderful job with the Enchanted Forest, and she would go really hardcore into the jewels and the glitteriness and the beauty of it. And I think she's great at creating other worlds. That's my pick.
I would like to see that too.
Favorite fairy tale from another cultural background?
This is really more of a folk tale, but the first thing that came to my mind was Anansi the Spider, the mischievous and resourceful folk hero of the Ashanti.
I'm not familiar with that tale.
There was a book that was always around in our classroom, and it was basically all of Anansi's children, like all these other little spiders, were protecting him from the falcon and the fish. He was like, "Well, how do I reward them?" And finds the moon basically and wants to gift the moon to one of the sons, but they can't decide which one earned it the most. And so basically, the god above all ends up holding on to it until we could decide who would be the child who would earn the moon. And so that the moon is in the sky still because they're still debating it.
Well, that's really beautiful.
Little stories like that.
I love that. My favorite is The Boy Who Drew Cats. It's a Japanese fairy tale, and it's about a boy who draws a lot of cats. And is people in his village are like, "Why are you always drawing cats?" He can't even stop himself. He just even does that out of habit when he's not even realizing. And so they're like, "We're just gonna send you off to, I think, a monastery because we don't really know what to do with you." And so he's at the monastery. He's still drawing all these cats. And one of the people there says, when it's nighttime, you would do well to sleep in small spaces. It's like this warning or weird kind of riddle that he tells him. And so at night, he wants to sleep on the cots, but he's like, actually, I should probably take that advice. And he hops into a little cabinet. And while he's in the cabinet, he hears all this fighting and screaming and yelling. And when he comes out in the morning, he sees this huge, massive rat, like a rat king, killed on the floor. And his cats that he was drawing on the walls came to life and killed the Rat King, which had been terrorizing these villages and had killed some of the soldiers and monastery folks. So I thought that was really a neat thing, like how your imagination can literally come alive and how he was ostracized, but he ended up saving the day.
Never stop a child from drawing cats.
Yeah, it might save you from a Rat King.
Yeah, I love that story. That's great.
Coziest fairy tale character.
Goldilocks. That girl
Mhm.
is sitting, snacking, and napping. What's cozier than that?
I don't think people are gonna agree with my pick. Your pick makes a lot of sense. Mine is Rumpelstiltskin. I'll go to hell and back for that man.
Well, so will Rumpelstiltskin.
I think he's largely misunderstood.
So why is Rumpelstiltskin misunderstood? Explain that to me.
He's lending a hand, and if she if she didn't want to make a deal, she didn't have to.
But then she would die the next day. Couldn't you say he's taking advantage of the situation?
But from his perspective, he's like, "I made a deal. Fair is fair. I'm coming to collect." And he gave her chances.
Oh, wow. Gillian, the mob enforcer, out here protecting Rumpelstiltskin.
I don't know, but I just think he's a funny little character. What really endears me to him is when he's dancing around the fire by himself, singing his name. That's so funny. Just to imagine, so like bopping around, singing their name by a fire by themselves. It's just so hilarious. Yeah, I just think that he's made into a villain. It's, hey, he didn't create the situation. He's just coming in there for a solution and offering it up. And I've never really thought about what he wanted to do with the baby. That's a place I really can't go. But hey, we don't know. He never says. He could just want to be a father himself. We don't know. I don't think he would have completely run off with the baby. I feel like he's very playful and funny. He might have come back, played some other games. They could raise it together. I don't know. I just feel like that wouldn't have been the end of
Raised
him.
together. He just wanted to be a part of that baby's life.
Maybe he want to be a dad. I don't know.
Uncle Rumpel.
Uncle Rumple, when he gets so mad, he stomps his leg through the earth. In other iterations, I think he like splits in half or something, but I can appreciate someone who has a temper. I can see myself getting so frustrated. I did my best trickery. I danced around a fire scene. I won it all. And I love little Rumple. Maybe I love the story. I'm like conflating that with him, but I don't think he's evil as everyone makes him out to be. So maybe I'll make my own adaptation, my own play.
I know. Do you remember that book, The Untold Story of the Three Little Pigs? And it was from the wolf's perspective. This is reminding me
Yeah.
of that, Julian. I think your calling is to retell that story from Rumpelstiltskin's perspective. Really give us a whole new, or Grendel, I'm thinking of. I think this is your calling in life.
I think so. And, he worked hard. He was really fast with that spinning.
Without delay, he delivered the gold. He just wants your child.
So, you wouldn't live with Rumpelstiltskin, but if you
No.
could live in any fairy tale, what would it be?
Under the Sea with a Little Mermaid. I'm conflating the Disney version, but I want to be down there with Sebastian and Flounder.
I love Flounder. He's so cute. Yeah, I think also too when you're a kid, you imagine doing things that you're not able to and breathing underwater and just this other world once again that we can imagine. Mine is a little bit Frosty, the Snow Queen, just because I love the imagery. And that's another thing I don't think you touched on. The illustrations are just so
Mhm.
amazing and cool and unique. And I love to imagine wintry magical world. And I won't get into the whole story of the Snow Queen, so it's convoluted and we'll be here all day, but I just want to be in a magical winter wonderland.
How often would you sing Let It Go?
As soon as we get off of this, I'm gonna belt it out. Hopefully Rumple will hear me. Favorite fairy tale Disney movie? This is our last question.
Beauty and the Beast for me, mostly off the back of Angela Lansbury as a singing teapot. The songs are incredible. A plus songs.
Yeah, it doesn't get better. Also, just that rose that is slowly
Yeah,
wilting.
beautiful.
That's
The stained
exciting.
glass art in the
Mhm.
beginning, really
So
great.
beautiful. Mine is Sleeping Beauty. I love the villain in it. Once again, coming to collect, making good on a
Cursing
promise.
a child, a theme for Gillian's favorites.
Just she has a lot of passion. She feels very passionate about it. She's mad, she's angry. The fairy godmother, the three little
Oh, yeah,
fairies.
I love them. They're so funny. I rewatched this actually relatively recently, and I was rolling on the floor laughing at the hijinks of those fairies. They are truly funny.
Yeah, and it's also interesting. There's a lot of three sisters in these
Yeah,
fairy tales, which is interesting. So
which
I
is
think
also
maybe
true to your life. So
yeah, I think that's why I related on it, and
yeah,
they each have their color, and when we were younger, my favorite was green, my middle sister was blue, and my younger sister was pink, and we had to have all of our colors, all the gifts that we got, or Easter baskets, like, everything had to be in our color. So I think it's fun that they don't ever switch up their colors.
in the movie, are those the colors of the fairies? I know one's blue and one's pink.
I think there's definitely a green one. I could
Yeah.
double check, but I'm like 95% positive. Well, we are scurrying back to our castle and we are pulling up the drawbridge and we are moving into our words of warmth.
My pumpkin carriage took me to these words of warmth, which are very famous and you've heard somewhere, I'm pretty sure, but I thought this was the perfect episode to revisit them. And this quote is from C.S. Lewis, the author of The Chronicles of Narnia, who said, "When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I am 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up."
How fairy tale-esque is it to even read fairy tales in secrets? Could fairy tale in of itself,
Yeah, right.
I really like that.
And man children like me have been using this quote as a defense of our lifestyle for many a year now. So I'm really grateful to C.S. Lewis for creating this airtight case for letting people leave us alone and enjoy our interests, whether that's fairy tales or Magic the Gathering.
Magic doesn't have an expiration date, Matt.
That's right.
My words of warmth is from J.M. Barrie and Peter Pan. When the first baby laughed for the first time, its laugh broke into 1,000 pieces, and they all went skipping about, and that was the beginning of fairies. And I love that because I was obsessed with fairies when I was younger. I think they're just so fun and bright and tricky and all the things, and they're little human fireflies. And so to imagine them coming from a baby's laugh, and we can all imagine that to use that imagery is just so perfect to describe fairies. I can't think of it better. A baby's laugh just cracking into 1,000 magical fairies is just so wonderful to think
It's
about.
such
So
child logic too. It's something you could say to a kid and they're like, that makes perfect sense to me. And I really like magic like that, that you take something and you evoke an element or an idea of something and it becomes this magical reality. I really love that quote for that.
That's very well said. So my candle reviews skipping out of the enchanted forest and into this wonderful aroma from Mythology Candles. I have to say, this was the perfect company for this episode. They have storybook candles, and outside of that, just all of these magical fairy, Celtic, just magical themes on their website. And I spent no less than an hour pouring over each section. There's so much to go over, but ultimately I chose the Trina Palace. There's another one that I had wanted. I think it's called a fairy ring, but the shipping wasn't going to work out. But this was a wonderful alternative. And the mood from the website, what appears but a forest to us is a palace to the tree nymphs, enchanted ceilings, mighty halls buried in tree trunks, and vines laden with crimson berries entwine over branches. And it smells like, according to the website, juice blood oranges and dark berries sipped from flower petal goblets with a hint of light cedar and pine. Clearly, I was very drawn in by that. And it has a wonderful box that it came in. The box has almost like a storybook drawing on it, and it's just really neat and cool. And I love the look of it. It has bright colors, and I thought it'd be wonderful to go into spring and summer with this light and berry, blood orange, and petals and all that stuff. So it's definitely a wick for me. It's this wonderful, light, berry, floral scent, just like as it promises. The throw isn't overwhelming. It's just a nice hint of something in the air. Like you can see a spark of magic, but it's not fully visible. That's a good way to describe this scent. It's there, but it's not overwhelming. It just complements the room. So definitely a wick up for me. I also want to flag that the company has a really cool find your scent quiz. And how you find the scent is you go on your own magical journey. It starts with the wooden door of a inn creaks open, and you're greeted by the lined face of the aging innkeeper. And he stares down his beard at you and barks, "Who are you and where did you come from?" And it gives you all these options of how you're going to answer. And it's about 5 to 6 questions, then it comes up with your scent profile. I had a lot of cool ones. It wasn't the Tree Nymph Palace, but I'm curious if you buy from this company what your scent profile is and what candles came up for you. It's founded by a woman named Leah, and she's a musician, and she created this company because she does Celtic fantasy kind of music, and she released an album, Ancient Winter, in 2019. And so she wanted to create candles to go along with the album release of that fit into this larger experience. And from there, it just really took off. So it's a super cool site. This is a perfect fairy-like summer spring scent. And yeah, I love it. I'm definitely gonna be buying from them again.
I love this. It's a really great combination of scent profile, but also the marketing and design and copy of the text. It adds an extra element, a fairy tale like enchantment to the experience of smelling the candle, which I think really takes it the extra mile, it seems like. I also took the quiz because I saw that link and I can't resist anything like that, choose your own adventure kind of thing. I really enjoyed the candles I got recommended. I want to try them. And I thought the questions were really cleverly worded. And even though some of them, like the fruitier toned questions, in terms of like, I could see that was going to put me into like a fruity food kind of direction. But overall, actually, in general, I thought the questions were pretty well worded insofar as like I was genuinely picking what I would want to do without thinking of the kinds of candles I was hoping it would give me. I really like that as a game experience they also have on the site.
Yeah, it's a full experience going into this candle site. And like I said, the box was really well designed and everything was a magical experience. The only thing that I would say is that it takes a long time to ship. So I would get ahead of it. But they also have some packages. So if you want to try out the storybook candles, you can get a mini set of 3, try out the fairy selection, get a little mini set. So lots of options. I'm curious to see what people have to say about it.
Yes, sounds like a great gift for the fantasy lover in your life.
Yes, well said.
And the link to mythology candles will be in our show notes. Our storybook ending is upon us, but before we go off happily ever after, we do have some shout outs. First of all, thank you to Stark's Candles, both for just making a really great lazy breakfast candle that we loved smelling in our last episode, but also gifted us with a review of our podcast, which was really nice. It's always wonderful when the candles that we love show the love back.
Yes.
That's a really exciting. So thank you to Stark's Candles for leaving this review, writing light, fun, cozy happiness. I enjoyed listening to this podcast today. I want to be friends with you guys. Seriously, was sipping my coffee and talking to you as if you could hear me. The topics are feel good, the recipes are top tier, and I want to try them all. I'm so glad you enjoyed the lazy breakfast candle. Definitely can't eat all that sugar these days, which was the inspiration of having my favorite cereal in candle form to have burning on the weekends. So glad I get to share with others from my era. Thank you. Can't wait to listen to the next episode. Again, thank you, Stark's Candles. And I love the little bit of history we got behind the making of that candle. Love that.
Yeah, what's a wonderful candle. And we also have another wonderful review from Carlin CBC. Carlin writes, "Such a wonderful podcast, so lovely to learn and listen in a cozy, calm environment. And I'm a huge fan of Stark's Candles. Hooray.
Hooray,
Hooray,
indeed.
hooray. Thank you."
I love that we have this whole Stark's Candles party happening. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, we stumbled into something great.
And I do want to also shout out our Patreon. where you can support our show and join our book club. Now, this is our second to last episode of our quote unquote season. I use that term loosely because really we're, every couple of weeks we drop a show, but we do go on our summer hiatus and we'll come back in August and we'll be gone in June and July. But I did want to make everyone aware that you don't have to actually pay anything to join our Patreon. They have free tiers now. So I just wanted to remind folks, if you are on Patreon and you support other artists that you love, if you already have an account, go ahead, and even if you weren't really intending on joining one of those levels or joining the book club, that's totally fine. Join our show as a free member, and at least you'll get the posts in your feed and be more updated about special events or new episodes and things like that. Or if you're kind of interested in checking out the Patreon and staying connected to it, but aren't really quite ready to contribute, totally fine. You can join as a free member.
This was a fun one. I had a really great time waltzing through the Enchanted Forest with you and reliving our magic memories.
Yes, and you can find us on social media as well. If you go through the brambles into the woods, you can go to at All Things Cozy Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and we also have a Facebook group. So follow those breadcrumbs to our social media channel. We hope that you pick up our glass slipper and join us before the clock strikes 12 in a couple more weeks for our final episode before we leave for the summer. Until next time, stay cozy.